What are some of the main health differences that you've seen with grass-fed versus industrial?
I know my cattle are higher in protein.
Okay.
They have a lot better mineral profile.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's...
I think that's a huge factor because of the food they're getting.
Yeah.
And
they are what they eat.
Exactly. And
That's
just like us.
Yeah.
Just like us.
Yeah. That's one thing I like about my kind of cattle is they're disease resistant naturally through natural selection.
Wow.
They are disease resistant. They don't need those stuff. They fight off disease through their natural immune system. That whole processing part is hard too. I mean, you buy a steak from me, the first bite off that steak, I tell people, I drove at least 1,000 miles to put that in your mouth. Well, it's all industrialized to provide food safety for America.
Right.
Which is fine, but you know, during COVID, that broke down. I mean, you walk into Walmart today and, you know, you have a meat counter that's 50 yards long. It's full of meat. Well, during COVID, there wasn't no meat in that. But I had meat here at the farmer's market. You could come buy it from me.
Hi, my name is Jared Garay, and welcome to the Humans in Harmony podcast, where we learn about the interconnectedness of the mind, body, and spirit. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into the body and how food affects the body, more specifically, beef. Today, we're joined by Mr. John Guldemann, who is a cattle rancher, and he raises grass-fed beef. And today, we're going to talk about the differences between grass-fed versus conventional industrial raised beef. And we're going to talk about health differences, environmental impacts, and flavor and quality differences. And if you get some value from this video, don't forget to drop a like and subscribe and help us out with the algorithm. But without further ado, Mr. John Guldemann, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for asking me.
Yeah, so why don't we start off with your cattle? You raise them yourself, right?
We were in ranching for 40 years. Raising cow-calf operation. We have since sort of retired. It's a hard life. I'm over 70, so we decided to have a little slower time. And I moved back to El Paso, or to Anthony, where I was born in El Paso and raised there.
Okay.
In fact, we're living in the house that my father built 40 years ago.
Very nice.
And we still are concentrating on Criollo cattle, which are cattle of Spanish descent. That's the type of cattle that we raised and we started all this with. And we chose those cattle way back in the beginning because of their ability to utilize marginal rangelands to such a high degree and still produce a very high protein, good quality beef.
Okay. What is a high marginal rangeland?
It's marginal rangeland.
Marginal range.
Marginal rangeland is a desert type rangeland like you see around Las Cruces.
Okay.
Clear all over the Southwest, there's marginal with, rainfalls are less, more heat.
Okay. Less
grass, more
Gotcha.
Vorbs, more brush to eat.
Okay, so they're more fit for this climate.
Yes. Yeah, it takes more land to support one cow in a marginal rangeland. You get into better rangelands, you cut down on the amount of land you have to use.
Gotcha. So you used to ranch them, and now you process the beef?
Now we just gather what other ranchers have produced.
Okay.
And we produce beef out of it.
Gotcha.
And we don't just buy them and sell them. We take them, and for a 60 to 90 day period, we put them on our program. Because most range beef on marginal rangelands usually are a little thinner. It depends on the time of year and how much rainfall they've had for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But we take them and then we keep them for a little while and get them on the gain and get them healthy, and then we sell that beef product.
Gotcha. And they're a little thinner because they don't have these juiced up hormones like they're getting at the industrial place, right?
Well, no, on the rangeland, yeah, they're hormone free, so they're using just the hormones that they're born with.
Right. So why is that? Why they're thinner?
No, the thinner is because it's marginal
Range.
range. It has, it's not the best range in the world, but it's we have vast quantities of marginal rangeland in the Southwest.
Mm-hmm.
This really good for nothing else but cattle production.
Gotcha.
So we utilize that. It was where I started in the cow business, and which I feel I'm an expert on marginal rangelands in the Southwest. I ranched in both Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona, and on a variety of different rangelands, but most all of it had marginal aspects.
Gotcha. So what are some of the main differences and main benefits that you find in grass-fed beef versus conventional industrial-raised beef?
Well, industrial-based beef is all geared around a box.
Mm-hmm.
Because the rancher has to provide an animal that can grow to a size within a certain time period. So when he's cut up, all of his primal and subprimal cuts will be fit into boxes and then stored in warehouses until the demand comes in for them to be sold.
Okay. So how does that affect the meat?
Well, the meat then is, and it can be the term fresh meat, which means it was never been frozen. There's also a term called aging process, and industrialized beef is all wet aged, which means all those subprimal cuts are put into cryovac packaging and then stored for 21 days or whatever time they have, and then they're cut up. Where our aging process is all dry aged, where we take the whole carcass and hang it in a cooler, a temperature controlled cooler, to temperature and environment, and then aged that way. And the reason you age meat is because of the enzymes that are in the meat naturally have more time to break down the tissue in the meat to make it more tender.
Oh.
And it also, the drying takes some of the moisture out, very little, maybe 1% of the moisture off the outside, and it intensifies your flavor.
Okay. Wow. Those are some great benefits right there.
Yes.
So what are some common misconceptions that you hear about grass-fed versus industrial beef?
Well, industrial beef is it's taken and goes through our feedlot system, and that really and I'm not trying to say industrialized beef is bad. I'm just saying that there's a different way to do it.
Okay.
And I think a more environmentally friendly way to do it. But when you do industrialized beef, your cattle have to be a certain size and weight to be ready to slaughter. And industrialized type of beef, they'll put those cattle in feedlots and feed them high concentrated diets, which changes the metabolism of the cow and makes their rumen more acid, and they have higher energy and not really a natural environment that cattle are used to. And my process brings cattle in, and we do have to hold them because we can't just march them directly into the processing plant because they're not ready. So we have to hold them a little while, get them on the gain, get them used to being in a pen and captured, used to people somewhat because of the stress level. We want a stress-free experience for the cattle on their last time on this earth before they die.
For sure, I've heard that can make a huge difference in the milk and the meat, how the animal feels. It can make a huge
difference in the quality of the meat, for sure.
Just by how the animal feels.
Yes.
That's crazy.
People don't give enough reverence to the meat they're eating. They should be thankful that live animal that gave its life and for your sustenance.
100%. What is this gain that you've mentioned a couple times?
Well, the gain is, and that's really the business end of it.
Uh-huh.
You have to have a certain amount of gain, and it's really cost of gain. You have to bring an animal in, and if you're putting weight on it, you want the cost of that gain to be low.
Okay. Are we talking weight gain?
Weight gain, yeah.
Okay.
And that's an important part of raising cattle is no matter if you're in a cow-calf or whatever, your cost of gain from a calf to the time you wean it and sell it has to be less than or at a point where you can make money on it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And I'd seen that you finished it with fodder sometimes. Is that
yeah,
related?
I finished, exclusively on fodder.
What is that?
Fodder is a farm-raised product.
Okay.
And it comes in different forms. I have a vertical farm
Uh-huh.
that we raise wheat and barley grass, any kind of grass from seed, in a hydroponic situation that uses a lot less inputs to produce it. I don't have to start a tractor or get out there and plow a field. Mine's all hydroponic, organically hydroponic, in a controlled
Greenhouse?
Well, it's not a greenhouse. It's just a building.
Gotcha.
You don't. For what I do, it only takes 7 days to produce. I take 9 pounds of seed, and then I harvest 30 to 40 pounds of grass in 7 days.
Nice. And that's what you finish the
And
cows with?
that's one kind of fodder. Other fodders I use is like chili. In the processing, you always have the waste and culls, and I feed that chili. I also have fed California apricots that had turned black. They didn't get the sulfides, and they turned black. I fed them. I fed tomato slurry from the juicing process. Pecans. I feed a pecan meal that is basically what is left over after the shelling process.
Okay.
That it provides nutrients, You have to, and that provides a flavor profile that's more unique to what I do. That's why my product is a custom product.
Gotcha.
Industrialized beef is all the same. Nearly all is done with corn.
Wheat?
Well, not so much wheat, but corn is the major player in finishing cattle in the United States.
Which is typically a GMO sprayed with lots of chemicals?
Field corn can be, typically GMO, not all the time.
Okay.
But it does, yeah. You have that happen. But of course, GMO is a very misunderstood term. Everything is GMO,
For sure.
whether through selective process by a farmer or through natural process by natural selection.
For sure.
But GMO is part of it.
Can you talk a little more on that? Because I think that is a commonly misunderstood term, GMO.
Yeah.
How does a farmer do it naturally?
Well, a farmer or a farm scientist will go in there and he'll selectively produce something with characteristics that he's trying to enforce.
Like
whether
crossbreeding?
Well, crossbreeding, yeah. Or actual, I don't know, the genetic manipulation of that. And a lot of times, I don't say it's bad, but it's impactful in a lot of ways. I know GMS corn or GMO corn, the stubble doesn't compost as quick as other corn. So you have that stubble left in your field. Even when you plow it in, you don't get the composting effect, through time as quickly. It takes longer. And they have GMO wheat the same way. GMO wheat probably is the most predominantly used grain for everything that is GMO. Other ones aren't near as much, but wheat you can pretty much guarantee that most commercial wheat is GMO.
Gotcha.
But if you have if selective breeding as opposed to natural breeding or natural selection process, natural selection process is what nature dictates that the plant should do in order to survive.
Adapting to the climate.
Adapting to the climate or whatever. Yeah,
Gotcha.
like that. And that has a great deal to do with the cattle I use too. These Criollo cattle were brought over to the Americas in 1493.
Oh, wow.
By the Spanish, and they've always been raised. Even in Spain back then, it was a natural selection more than a selective breeding. Although once you get man involved, everybody has their preferences in what they raise, and selective breeding becomes pretty much a norm. I even went to the far as saying my process of raising beef was natural selection. So I selectively breed for natural selection. So it's and people breed for different traits that might be good for their rangeland and what they want to do. That's just normal things that happen. I don't think one is better than the other necessarily, except I think that selective breeding can get out of hand. Man has a tendency to take things to the extreme, and where natural selection is more what nature dictates.
Yes. Where greed can play a role there.
Yes, greed can play a role. All sorts of things can play a role. But I see especially on marginal rangelands, the advantages of natural selection are far greater than the other.
Gotcha. Because the cow's adapting naturally, and he just fits better in his climate.
Yes, in this climate, and you realize the history of these cattle. They were brought to the New World and probably reached the mainland of Mexico in around 1593, and then they spread out through Central, South, and North America.
Wow.
And a lot of that was just, cattle, they went almost feral because they reproduced, and some would get away. And, you look at our expansion in civilization, cattle were the first thing to go. They aided us in colonization of the Americas because they brought something for the Spanish brought them to colonize, like New Mexico. They were all over New Mexico at one time.
As one of the main food sources.
Well, and they made food sources and hide. They provided, materials. Hides and lard were a big commodity back then.
Absolutely.
So, and of course, that's changed now. Everything's changed, but that they represent a lot about our history, and I think that this is another process. Another thing that I like about the biodiversity in our cattle has narrowed down somewhat. My wife and I just got back from vacation. We went from here to North Dakota, across to Montana, and back down through Colorado. And across, I didn't just stay on the interstates. We sort of crossed out and looked at the country. And 99% of the cattle in America today are black because of the Angus influence. Angus has a great influence on what cattle we have today because they have a certified Angus program, certified beef. And they started this back in the 60s, and they did the best job of it. So consequently, all cattle are black almost. And even cattle, even other cattle breeds have adapted it. You take the Limousin cattle are from France. Now in France, all Limousin cattle are red. But through the restrictions of importing cattle, semen has been brought over from Limousin cattle, and then they started a breed-up program to produce Limousin in America. Well, they decided that because of Angus, black Limousin would be better. So they used surrogate mothers for semen that were Angus, and they just bred them and kept the black color. So you have black limousine in America.
So was there an issue with that?
Well, no, there isn't. It was good for the Angus people.
Because it's certified Angus?
Certified Angus, but you have to realize that to be certified Angus, you don't have to have any Angus blood. You have to have 51% black hairs.
Really?
On the carcass. That's the only thing that requires. And the carcass quality. Carcass quality has a lot to do with it. They want that good carcass quality. Angus brings that to the table, but I've fed cattle in a feedlot that weren't Angus, but they had 51% black hairs. They were good cattle, had a good carcass, and they went into the certified Angus program.
And
These Criollo cattle.
Is that certified Angus, is that mostly for branding purposes?
That's for branding purposes, for selling meat. It's not for, but you realize Angus is the only black cattle that's everywhere. I mean, there's a great deal of them. It just adds to that deal. You take my kind of cattle, which are Criollos. Criollos are Corriente, Texas Longhorns, Florida Crackers, Georgia Piney Woods, and they have black in them, but a lot of them are spotted, speckled, red, yellows, different things. Well, now there's Corriente breeders that raise nothing but black Corrientes, so they can hit the black Angus certified program.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Another Criollo breed, which is black, are the Delidias, which are the fighting cattle. I mean, there is black cattle out there, but Angus have so saturated the industry because of the certified Angus beef program that everybody wants to cash in on that.
Gotcha.
Because a black cow will produce, I think, in her lifetime, monetarily, $1,200 more than a red cow.
Wow.
Just because she's black.
Because of the certification.
Yeah, the certification program.
That's crazy.
And
so
I mean,
there's the greed.
It was a great thing for Angus cattle and certified Angus cattle. Don't get me wrong; their breed took off, but everybody else fell behind.
Yeah. And you think there was some manipulation in there? Well, I mean, maybe someone was just capitalizing on a branding opportunity, or.
Well, I think somebody's capitalizing on a branding opportunity.
Yeah.
Of course, that was the first branding opportunity. I don't think they knew what they were doing.
Right.
I think they just stumbled into. Through luck, stumbled into it and then realized it and took advantage of it.
Capitalized.
Sure. Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with Angus cattle.
Right.
I mean, they're fine. They're an English breed. They tend to produce a high saturated fat product, though.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit about saturated fats. They're commonly demonized nowadays, and I personally think saturated fats are great for you. You have any experience with?
Well, it depends on which type of saturated fat you're talking about.
I think most of them are good for you. Like coming from avocado oil, coconut oil.
Those are all low
animal fats.
Low saturated fats. Fats. I don't say they don't have fat, but it's low saturated. I think the terms are monosaturated and polysaturated.
Okay.
And I think the monosaturated fat are the good ones, and the poly are the ones that are bad for you. There are good fats and bad fats.
100%.
On the cows that I raise, they don't have but about a quarter inch of back fat. That's a covering on the back between the carcass and the hide. Where an Angus will probably have up to 2 inches of back fat.
Wow.
And the fat that I think is more healthy for you is the internal fat, the fat around the organs, the kidney fat, not the back fat.
Gotcha.
And that's that. And I've done a little research. I've had a little research presented to me, but not enough to substantiate a whole lot of, because these cattle aren't popular in commercial industry, so they don't get a lot of research. But I did a little research through Cattlemen's Texas Longhorn Registry, and the TLBA did some research that showed that these cattle are lower in saturated fats, which would be a marketable thing to market on.
Right. Yeah. But would you say that the saturated fats in your cattle is not necessarily good for you, like the back fat?
Well, there's not enough back fat to save.
I see.
I
see. Well, like, what about the fat? Like, you get a New York strip, you got the fat cap on the side there.
You do have the back fat, cat fat on the side, and it adds lots of flavor.
That's right.
And if you don't eat a whole lot of it, too much of it, and you don't have it as much as you don't have as much saturated fat in the marbling, which makes a difference.
Gotcha.
But I like fat.
I do too.
I mean, I like to eat it. It tastes good. But a lot of that back fat is waste fat also. That's why the carcass quality has a lot to do with it. Because if you have a yield grade of 1, that means your back fat is smaller. If you yield grade 2 to 3, that means you have a thick back fat. But you look at the history of the development of cattle, you go back into the 1800s, and the big thing, people didn't eat that much meat, beef, but they had back fat for oils, and that was a big deal. And of course the hide industry too.
Cooking oils, light. They burned it to see. Okay.
That was one of the main things.
Wow.
There's a picture that some artist did of it was before mechanical sailing. It was all ships with sails, but it was moored off the coast of California, which had a lot of these Spanish cattle, but they had those things gathered up. There was a picture of maybe 2,000 or 3,000 cattle, and they were killing them, slaughtering them right there, and of course they would eat the prime parts of the cattle while they were doing it and dry some of the meat, but the main thing was to harvest the hide and the fat for oils, for light, and then leather was
priceless.
Yeah. So we didn't start out raising cattle for beef like they do now.
Wow.
As much, it didn't start that way.
So what was the main form of meat back then? Wild game?
Well, wild game and hogs and sheep. Sheep were probably more prevalent,
Oh, wow.
They used beef to dry. Dried beef was pretty, because you could dry beef, take it on your ship, take it across the country before refrigeration.
Like jerky?
Like jerky, yeah. Dried beef.
Just because it's preserved?
Or even pounded up in powdered form.
Oh, wow.
You could use it flavor, yeah.
Huh.
In Mexico, carne seca is not jerky. It's just dried beef, and most time there's still fibers of beef there, but it's mostly dried powder.
Huh.
You can just throw it in a soup, or.
So what are some of the main health differences that you've seen with grass-fed versus industrial?
Well, the main thing is saturated fats. Other thing,
lower levels?
Or what?
Lower levels of saturated fats?
Lower levels of saturated fat, yeah.
Okay.
Lower levels of saturated fat. I know my cattle are higher in protein.
Okay.
They have a lot better mineral profile.
Mm-hmm.
That's.
I think that's a huge factor because of the food they're getting.
Yeah.
And
they are what they eat.
Exactly. And
That's
just like us.
Yeah.
Just like us.
Yeah. That's true. That's very true.
And that's one of the reasons I switched to that. And I'm personally trying to get back to the old days and how they ate back then with all this new ultra-processed food. A lot of this stuff is garbage, especially here in America.
Oh, yes. Processed food is terrible. I never eat processed food. We make everything ourselves.
Same here. And it's just a bunch of chemicals.
The beef industry has developed almost to the point, because of refrigeration and the excess of farm goods. Like a lot of farmers, they'll raise corn, and the price of corn drops. Well, then the price of cattle is up, so corn goes to cattle to make money. I mean, it's just it's just the way it is, because there's a lot of corn produced.
How do the hormones and antibiotics have a difference, or how do they affect the cattle? Because you said you do not raise your cattle with hormones or antibiotics.
No.
Why is that?
Well, the hormone, let's define that. When a calf is born, it's either female or male.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the male cattle are usually castrated and used for slaughter. Females typically go back into breeding herds. But anyway, that male calf is born with testicles, which are hormone producing, and they produce all the same hormones that a rancher will inject one with for growth. And in my system is I let them I'd rather let them keep their testicles and let them grow with that and castrate at a later age where they have more growth, so you don't have to use synthetic hormones. I mean, there's a lot of, and I don't know how much research there is, but there's a lot of talk about, synthetic hormones get into the food system, and then they affect people, to the point where, young women are maturing at a quicker age, and all this. I don't know if any of that's true or not, but it doesn't sound good. But I'd rather let the delayed castration, let the cattle, grow on their
naturally
own hormones, because it costs money every time you stick that hormone needle into them. Well, that's $2 or $1, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with antibiotics. Antibiotics should be defined too as subtherapeutic antibiotics is really the bad part. Subtherapeutic are the antibiotics that you feed one to keep it from getting sick. It's not the antibiotics that you feed one after it's sick to make it well.
Mm-hmm.
Those subtherapeutic, they're the ones that they're fed, so the animal is saturated with those from the time it's weaned. They get those subtherapeutic antibiotics,
and they have it their whole lifespan.
Well, yeah, they can have it their whole lifespan.
Wow. So then they're just soaked with it by the time they're harvested.
Well, it depends, on how they're handled, but they can have they can have it for a little while, maybe when they're weaned, to keep them from, because the death loss, a rancher has to deal with that death loss.
Mm-hmm.
He's the one that's losing out. And I tell you what, the ranchers are on the bottom end of the stick, because they the ones that make all the money and dictate things are the processors.
Uh-huh.
The guys on there producing the beef, they're the ones that are subject to all the low. So a rancher, if he's losing calves because they're getting sick at weaning, well, he uses subtherapeutic antibiotics to
keep them alive.
Keep them alive. That's one thing I like about my kind of cattle is they're disease resistant naturally through natural selection.
Wow.
They are disease resistant. They don't need those subtherapeutic. They fight off disease through their natural immune system.
Wow. That's powerful.
Yeah.
That's powerful. Why do you want to castrate these male cows, bulls?
Well, you don't. You have the, and there's no. I've never read one bit of research on this, but
like a common practice.
Well, you worry about the taste that those hormones and that male
The testosterone.
Because basically, a lot of people say bull meat is tough and that stuff, which I don't know if there's any. I never read anything that substantiate that. But I do know that if you castrate one at the right age, it will continue to grow. Where a bull, if he's left with the bulls, he won't continue to grow if he keeps that testosterone level. They grow better after they, and a steer will grow a lot bigger than a bull. If you have if you let them grow, a bull will mature out about 5 to 7 years old. That's the biggest he's going to get. That steer, he'll grow till he's 20.
Wow.
I don't know why.
After being castrated.
After being castrated, yeah.
Wow.
I don't know why.
You would think the testosterone would keep him growing, but
well,
I guess not.
Testosterone grows you to a certain point, And I don't know what the research is, but
Gotcha.
I see it in practical situations. I mean, I can see the stuff.
Uh-huh.
A lot of my stuff, research is good, science is good. I'm not trying to put them, but the old eye seeing things,
Experience.
tells you a lot.
100%.
That's something I've experienced, and I know that happens.
Absolutely.
You know?
And that's the testosterone aspect. I hear that in deer too, like hunting deer. You kill a big monster buck, and they say it's going to have tougher meat than if you kill a young buck. I wonder if that's the similar testosterone
I think, too.
relation.
And it affects the taste. The bigger the buck, the gamier it's going to taste.
Right. I've heard you get a young buck, it's like,
Yeah.
oh, that's going to be good meat.
And most people that kill bulls, they grind them up a lot of times, but not always. I mean, well, beef industry is so huge, a lot of things can happen.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing about our beef system is the grading system that USDA has put on them. The grading system, which signifies quality, bases it all on fat. Nothing's to do with tenderness or
Really?
anything else. It's just fat.
Well, isn't the fat related to tenderness? Like the marbling?
Well, they say it is, but it isn't.
Really?
If they're not born tender, I don't care how fat they get, they're not going to get tender.
Huh.
You know, hanging them.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Born tender?
Well, yeah, some are just their genetic trait that they're born tender, more tender than others. Like Bremer cattle, Brahman cattle. I don't like to have names, but the Brahman breed tends to be a tougher breed than the English breeds. The Spanish cattle have a shorter fiber meat, which are their naturally born tender. I mean, it's just part of their genetic makeup. Of course, Bremer cattle were developed in more humid, hot country, so that's some of the stuff that makes that beef more tough, I guess.
Gotcha.
Natural selection has a lot to do with all this stuff, and I don't know the reasons for a lot of natural selection. In some natural selections, I do it, like horn growth, horn development. Watusi cattle have big horns that come straight out, and they're heavy beamed because the type of predator that predates on them are lions and big predators. Where a Criollo cow, their horns come out and curl because their predator are more like wolf type predators that hunt in packs, and they have to be able to use their horns to reach back and grab them, and they're sprung with just like a spring is sprung. They have to have that curve so they don't break, and they can reach and flip them.
Wow.
But that's a natural selection.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, because a lion attacks from the front.
Uh-huh. So we kind of mentioned this briefly earlier, but flavor and quality, what's the difference between your grass-fed cattle versus industrial?
Well, industrialized is more, everything's the same.
Mm-hmm.
So cornbed beef, when you go to the store, and this is the selling point, that you want it to taste the same every time.
Uniform.
Where craft beef is has a different profile because other things are used besides corn every time to raise them. Like some farmers or ranchers, they might have an apple orchard, and so they can get all their cull apples and give them to their livestock, or just different things that affects the flavor of beef. Some positive, some negative. I mean, you don't feed them onions because they'll taste like onions. Or I know there's a brush in Texas called wahia that affects the taste. But there's a lot of things that affects the taste positively.
Wow.
And that's what I feel that with my process, we positively affect that taste. I want the taste of the Southwest. These are Southwest cattle, desert cattle. They should taste like the Southwest and reflect what they eat out of the Southwest.
That's why you feed them chili.
So I feed them chili and pecans, and that's why I like them out on the range, because they're eating forbs, mesquite, four-winged saltbush. There's all sorts of things that they eat out there that affects their taste.
Native plants.
Native plants, yeah.
What have you found that gives them the best flavor? Is there one that stands out?
Well, the apricots are really good, but what I do now with the chili, I mean, they love chili, red chili especially.
Really?
Yeah, they'll quit a field full of green grass and go to a chili field. And the choice, I've grazed them side by side with an open gate between them, and they'll eat all that chili before they'll go. And now they'll eat grass too.
Yeah.
But they'll pretty much concentrate on that chili until they can.
Wow.
There's nothing else left.
And my whole family, we're a bunch of chili farmers. We actually have a chili processing plant, so I'm real familiar with chili.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I like chili processing plants because I get. Another thing is it's economically feasible. That's one thing about cost of gain is you have to keep your cost of gain down.
For sure.
Well, I get all my chili waste for free.
Uh-huh.
The pecan waste is very little. I got all my apricots for free. I mean, they're just going to throw them away.
Mm-hmm.
And that affects,
the
how you
line.
produce one. I mean, a feedlot will find the cheapest way to feed them. Of course, a big feedlot, we're talking 50,000 head feedlot, they can afford to buy stuff lower and get good deals on stuff. A little guy like me, I mean, I only kill like 5 or 6 head a month. I have to work at making it cheap.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a little time to put that together.
Absolutely.
That whole processing part is hard too. I mean, you buy a steak from me, the first bite off that steak, I tell people, I drove at least 1,000 miles to put that in your mouth because the processing plants are so spread out. We're in a radius of about 200 to 250 miles of 4 processing plants. And they're small. I can't go to the big ones. You go up to Kansas and they have processing plants that'll kill 7,000 head every 8 hours. And that's a big plant. I mean, it's huge. I got plants that only kill maybe 8 a day, which provides a more custom cut. But I can't equate to that.
Mm-hmm.
I have to gear mine down. I can't go to the feed store and buy feed because it costs too much. I have to make my own feed. I have to produce it and make it, and to keep the costs down so I can make money on the product. Because if I get that product too high, people won't buy it. I don't care how good it tastes. Of course, they won't buy something that doesn't taste good either. But price has a lot to do with it, especially in this day and age. I mean, our prices are going up exponentially fast.
Mm-hmm. No, I have so much respect for small farmers and small ranchers because I know how hard it is to get by in today's world because everything's against the small rancher and the small farmer.
Well, it's all industrialized to provide food safety for America.
Right.
Which is fine. But, during COVID, that broke down. I mean, you walk into Walmart today and, you have a meat counter that's 50 yards long that's full of meat. Well, during COVID, there wasn't no meat in that. But I had meat here at the farmer's market. You could come buy it from me. I had more security than our industrialized during that period.
Wow.
I had a line at the processing plant. And I had cattle going there. Not very many, but I still had them.
That's awesome.
And we need more of that.
We do need more of that.
In all forms of food.
Absolutely.
I'm a big proponent of farmers markets because they're deemed essential. I mean, when COVID closed everything else down, our farmers kept coming to the market and selling because we were deemed essential. We weren't under the mandate by the government to close.
That's amazing.
Because we had food.
You had food.
Yeah.
And there wasn't any in the stores.
No. I mean, it broke down big time.
Wow.
And it was only momentarily in the big scheme of things, but still, it was an industrialized food system that started at the end of World War II or maybe before, and escalated through the war. I mean, we had to have a sustainable amount of food to provide food during the war. I mean, that's a big burden to do, and that's what that industrialized food system come from, was that. And we are probably farming more arable land than we should now. I mean, some land shouldn't be farmed, but it is. But that's where our food system is.
Yeah.
And we provide food for the world now, not just us.
It's crazy. And the over-industrialization of things has corrupted many industries, whether the intention was there or not. I think it's corrupted so many industries. And with that, that's why you see America so unhealthy. We're one of the richest countries in the world, and we have one of the worst health ratings out of all the countries out there.
Oh yeah, obesity is prevalent. You go to the mall or anywhere where public, it's just disgusting.
It is. And it didn't used to be like that.
No, it didn't used to be like that.
But when you were young, that was rare.
Well, it was more rare. It was the start of that.
It was the start.
I was a baby boomer, and that's where it started. Sure did. I was a product of that because my mother was a great cook, but I overate. Not processed foods, but I overate. I mean, I weighed 260 pounds when I was 16.
Oh wow!
Just because I like to eat, and it was good.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obesity is a lot of mental. It's not just
it's a great
processed
point.
food necessarily. It's mental too.
It's a great point.
Yeah.
That's a huge aspect of it because the discipline.
The discipline, yeah.
It's like, hey, you control what goes in your body.
Right. That's important.
That is important.
Yeah.
It's important. So we talked about the health and flavor quality differences. Let's talk about a little bit of the environmental differences with grass-fed versus industrial, because you see on the headlines and the news and stuff, cattle gets a bad rap. I personally think so. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, they do. And, let's take methane production.
Yeah.
Let's say cow
farts
produce, I don't know how much of the methane, but, a sizable amount. But you have the industrialized version where you have feedlots from 50 to 100,000 head. You have huge dairies that are concentrated and fed concentrated diets, and that methane production off those areas are tremendous. But I don't think an old cow on the rangeland, especially my rangeland, sometimes she has just trouble finding enough to eat to live. I don't think the methane production is so great there. But the measurement of methane production, if you measure methane production at a feedlot, it's going to be real high. And I think it's been discriminated how they measure that.
Yeah, how do they measure it?
Well, they take readings of the methane
in an air sample.
Well, an air sample, yeah, there at the feedlot. You have 100,000 head feedlot. I mean, you're talking about a lot of cattle. I mean,
yeah.
And if you take a reading there, that methane production is extremely high.
So there's essentially a fart cloud around these cows.
Yeah, the belch cow. They belch. Cows
don't
fart.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's burps.
They belch. Cows have multi-stomachs. They have 4 of them.
That's right.
And they regurgitate their food and chew it twice in order to get all the nutrients out of it.
Mm.
So, I mean, the cows should not be, the cows are a protein-making factory.
Mm-hmm.
And they use low-quality products to produce high-quality protein. And people don't realize what we would have done as a developing nation if we didn't have protein. How would we develop? How would, we have people like yourself that are mechanical engineers. Well, if you didn't have enough protein, how would you develop? If your kids don't have enough protein to eat, because the protein source in vegetables is there, but it's really hard to harvest that and get it right. People don't understand how to get enough protein in their diet if they don't have beef.
Mm-hmm. You got to supplement.
Yeah. I mean, you take somebody that's a kickboxer, that's a vegetarian, and he's losing. And you go ask his trainer, how come I'm losing? He's going to say, because you don't eat meat. You don't have enough protein. I mean, protein fuels us in what we do.
I agree 1,000%. And I truly think beef is one of the best forms, or meat in general, because it's so nutrient dense.
Yes.
Versus a vegetable or a fruit, which, don't get me wrong, there's definitely healthy fruits and vegetables out there that are packed with nutrients, but you're not going to get the same amount of nutrients packed in that small form like you get with the meat.
Right. And, I'm not saying we all have to be carnivores.
Right.
I say we should be omnivores. I mean, there are very, very few carnivore societies. Only one to mind I can think of is Alaskan natives. Have a high, carnivore.
Yeah.
They don't have vegetables.
There's no plants up there.
No plants up there. And they eat a lot of fat. And, of course, they have to eat fat to survive in the winter.
Mm-hmm.
But it's protein and fat. And that's the main thing down here. Everybody asks me, what's my fat content of my meat? That's a big question.
Really?
And I try to tell them I don't have my meat tested. I just estimate it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a big question people have. And they don't know why.
Yeah.
But they ask that.
Huh. That's interesting. Personally, I look for the fattier pieces of steaks. When I go pick out a ribeye, I'm looking for as much marbling as possible, and that's the one I pick. But not everyone thinks that way.
Well, I don't think that's a good way to pick meat, personally.
Really? Okay.
Well, no. I mean, you have to learn how to cook lower saturated fat meats like I produce.
Okay.
They take about 20% less cooking.
20% less.
Because you don't have to melt the fat.
Gotcha.
You use the natural moisture in the meat, and meat is tender, more tender raw than it is cooked. The more you cook it, the tougher it gets.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So the traditional industrial meat, that was the rule that I always heard: get the most marbling. Now that I've switched to grass-fed, I get some from you, and I've also got some from natural grocers, but I've always looked for that marbling. So you're saying that's not an important factor?
Well, it's important. There's taste there.
Flavor, but not for
we have
tender.
to have fat. Don't get me wrong. We have to have fat, but you take excessive fat like the marbling in the Wagyu,
Mm-hmm.
where the red meat's not red anymore. It's pinkish
Mm-hmm.
because there's so much fat. I don't think that's... It tastes great. It's a great
Delicacy.
delicacy, yeah. But I don't think it's a healthy meat,
Okay. Interesting.
But I like marbling. Don't get me wrong.
Oh, yeah.
And I want the fat to be of the correct type, low saturated fat.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Are there any other environmental impacts that you...
Well, these type of cattle are easier on rangelands. They don't get as big, as heavy as cattle. I mean, our cattle have gotten bigger and bigger through selective breeding, where these cattle are less impactful on our rangelands. They can walk farther from water in a day, or in 7 days. They stay away from. They stay out, but they don't impact. They also don't have to have just grass to eat. They can eat all types of stuff.
Brush.
Yeah, and all cattle will utilize that, but these type of cattle utilize it to a finer degree. They'll eat stuff that other cattle won't eat.
So they can move away further, and they're not trampling all the
right, and they handle
plants.
Stress better. They can go farther from water, stay away from water longer because they handle stress better. They can handle higher heat.
Okay.
So that's one of the things I like about these cattle. They're also very tractable. They have horns, but I've never been
Attacked?
subject to danger. Most people are just scared when they walk in the pen of the big horns, but cattle won't. If you get too close to them, they'll stand up and look at you and shake their head, but they're not going to charge you. Where I've had polled cattle without horns, especially Bremer crosses, just come and smear me all over the corral with a bare head. Just get down and just push on in.
Wow.
They're not I like cattle that are tractable. They will warn you if you're too close. It's all a matter of closeness, you know.
Yeah, respect.
Body English with cattle is the key. And
you talk a little bit more about that?
well, when you're working cattle in a pen, whether it's horseback or on foot, the body English, if you get too close or if you get too far ahead, you know, they're going to turn back. I mean, the body English, you stay at one's hip and look in the eye sometimes can change things, or a not look in the eye. If you ignore it and it sees you, then it doesn't. But if you're staring at it, it's staring back. And same with people, you know, that body English. Well, your position and how you work cattle makes them more gentle, or if they're tractable, they'll work easier. I don't want to get hurt. I mean,
and you want to keep them low stress, so they're
low stress, yeah.
better meat.
In my line of work, horses and cattle are big. You know, I only weigh, 200 pounds. They weigh 800 to 1,200. You know,
they can do some damage.
And they can do some damage. Yeah, if you play with big toys, you're going to get hurt big. You know, that's what I say.
Yeah.
But I just like these type of cattle. They've always been a natural to me, because they've been so easy to get along with and tractable. And I can see the difference they make on the environment. They'll utilize places, they'll climb higher on a mountain to utilize better things and not impact, things like a lot of cattle will just stay in the bottom, so they'll never climb up out of things. Yeah, that's something that has to be taught to you by your mother almost. And so that's what those mothers do, it's just a thing. The way they raise cattle in America, I don't agree with at all. I mean, a lot of things I would do differently, but I'm just me. But
you talking industrially or free range?
Well, in free range, the industrial process starts at the cow-calf, because that cow-calf has to produce a product that can fit into the mold and provide and fit that box. And the USDA now has, this has been quite a while since mad cow. Because of mad cow, which was really a non-event here. I mean, there's somebody in Europe, but there was like one instance of mad cow in the United States. But they put regulations in that you cannot slaughter cattle over 30 months and cut T-bones out of them. And certain parts can't be cut because of mad cow. The T-bone, for one, has a spinal notch. Has that spine. Well, mad cow doesn't manifest in younger cattle, so they allow you on cattle that young to keep that T-bone in the spinal notch. But if they get older, because you might catch mad cow for them, because I always take that little piece of spine out and eat it. You can catch mad cow from it, but it's a non-event. But what it did, and you can't export cattle. Most countries won't accept cattle export over 30 months.
Because of mad cow disease?
Mad cow disease. Okay, so you take a cow industry that is bred cattle for, one way, and then you tell them you've got to have these cattle ready to go to the feedlot at 30 months or go to slaughter at 30 months. That means you got to wean bigger calves. You've changed the whole system from the cow-calf to the end.
Wow.
One affects the other.
For sure. And every inch along the way.
And they're discriminated against if they don't fit that.
Yeah.
Like my type of cattle, let's say in a cattle auction. And a cattle auction reflects the true value. Any auction reflects the true value of what you're trying to sell. Well, if I take my kind of cattle in there, they're going to be discounted 50%.
Why is that?
Because they won't fit that mold.
They could have mad cow disease.
They could have mad cow, which is out here, mad cow, we're in the desert.
Right.
I mean, heat takes care of everything.
But still, that's their concern.
They can't take a chance.
Right.
But dairy cows, you have a lot bigger chance, for sure, because they're all concentrated. But the range cattle, it's just a non-issue.
You almost never see it.
Never see it.
Never.
Only time there's any mad cow was up, and there were Canadian cattle that probably strain originated in England. They come across, and Canadian cow was imported, dairy cow, and they found mad cow in her. So
And now that's affected the value of all these other
affected
cows.
everything.
Wow.
Yeah.
Crazy.
And of course, the drought has affected beef cattle industry. That's why everything's gone up so much. I mean, I'm paying 50% more for the cattle I get as I was before mad cow. And the drought has huge effect on it.
Drought?
Yeah.
Drought.
It's dry.
Drought.
We're not pretty. I mean, the one common denominator between for a rancher to make money is rain. If you don't have rain, I don't care how the price of cattle goes up, he can't feed one on a range and produce it and make any money. But if it rains, he can get paid the lowest price and have a stellar year and make money. So you have to have rain. The way this drought has affected us is we're in a 20-year drought. I mean, when I got into ranching, the big drought everybody talked about was the drought of the 50s, which was about 7 to 8 years. Now I've lived through a 20-year drought, and there's no cattle left. People tell you to stop eating beef because they think that they affect our environment so much. Well, drought takes care of that. And we have a lot less cattle, probably 30%, 40%, 50% less cattle now than we did 20 years ago.
That's insane. And you see it affecting the farming industry too. I mean, farmers are struggling to water their crops.
Well, farmers are struggling to grow their crops. They also are struggling to raise a crop to sell.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah, we need some rain.
They used to, if you couldn't sell your corn crop, you could feed cattle and make money on it still. Now it don't matter. There are not enough cattle are just dwindling.
You hear a lot about carbon footprint. What do you have to say about the carbon footprint?
Well, I'm raising my cattle with the least carbon footprint. I don't have to go out there and start a tractor and use oil and use fuel to do what I do. You know, I use electricity, but hopefully our electricity the carbon imprint is dropping. But that carbon imprint, you take our pecan in the Mesilla Valley, they use a lot of carbon because they're pumping all that water. Since the drought, we have restrictions on irrigation water that comes naturally, so they're pumping.
That's right.
And they're pumping with fuel.
Pecans are thirsty.
And they use up a lot of the water.
How about industrial cows? The carbon footprint of them?
They're higher because
What's the main factors there?
The main factor is the feedlot, all the grain you have to produce with tractors and farming. I mean, I think the methane is definitely a problem there because there is such concentration of it. Nitrogen production. You have that gets into our ground table. That's the number one polluter of our groundwater is nitrogen production.
From fertilizers?
Fertilizers and runoff from feedlots. Manure is really high in nitrogen.
Gotcha.
So
is that why they use it as a fertilizer?
They use it as a fertilizer, yeah. And of course, feedlots are required. Big feedlots are required to capture that runoff, and so are dairies. Capture that runoff, and then pump the runoff off, and then they can sell the compost someplace else.
You know, I've seen at dairies they have these pits in the back where it's like little ponds. Is that what that is?
They're pits, and they filter that. They have to filter that water, pump it to a field, and irrigate with it.
Gotcha.
But then again, none of that stuff they grow in those fields can be fed to cattle.
Why?
I don't know why. I know all sewage treatment plants.
What's that? Sewage treatment?
Yeah, for human waste. A lot of them have, especially small ones in rural communities, they have fields that once they process the
human waste,
the waste, and they use that water, there's a lot of water, then they'll flood it out and irrigate stuff. Well, you can't graze cattle on that because of the threat of disease. I don't, you know.
Yeah.
That's just a weird deal. But
Some people say that grass-fed beef is more expensive and harder to find. What would you say to those people?
that's true. Good grass-fed beef is more expensive to produce because it's done on a smaller scale.
Mm-hmm.
Although it's changing, there's a lot of industrialized grass producers that have upped their volume. You know, a lot of programs. Neiman, there's one in Montana called Mannix that produce quite a bit, but not on the scale. And there's also the fact that it costs more to keep your cattle on a pasture. It costs you more than an industrialized version of a feedlot that can produce it because of the volume, produce it at a smaller level. On a craft basis like I do, you know, I have to really work at keeping my costs down.
Mm-hmm.
And my costs are always below national grass-fed
Averages.
You know, I check that on it's posted once a month by the AMS, the American or the Agricultural Marketing Service, and they post that grass-fed prices.
So you run a tight ship?
Well, I have to, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, it's a marginal way to make a living.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm retired and I pay bills and I supplement my Social Security income, but I'm not making any money, you know.
Yeah.
But I like doing it.
That's what
I have
matters.
to do something.
Yeah.
I can't sit at home.
For sure. And you're giving back to the community in one of the most valuable ways.
Well, I try to, yeah. I think so.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Have you seen a growing demand for grass-fed beef?
I've seen it grow. Grass-fed meat. The trouble with grass-fed meat is keeping the quality there. A lot of times it doesn't pass on quality. A lot of people don't like the quality of it. It's just not there. And of course, it's hard to go up against a good corn-fed steer. I mean that's a lot of flavor. That fat's a lot of flavor, you know.
Massive steak too.
Yeah, massive. Yeah, and my cattle are smaller, so you know.
Smaller but more nutrient dense.
Smaller, more nutrient dense, but you're not. You know, you go into a restaurant, and a 12-ounce steak is big for me. You know, I cut 12-ounce steaks, make them thicker, but you can get a 12-ounce steak or 16-ounce steak, or you know, you can get bigger cuts. You know, and heavier carcasses, and so the cuts are bigger. And I think that the housewife of today, or our demands for the day, require us to have a little smaller portion. I don't, you know, I have trouble eating 16 ounces of steak. I mean, I can do it, but I'm miserable afterwards.
No, that's a good point because
8-ounce steak, you know, is about right.
Yeah.
For me, so.
Same here. I could definitely slam a big steak.
Yeah.
But I do feel a little bloated after and heavy, and these grass-fed ribeyes are like the perfect size for me.
Yeah.
And usually they are 8-ounce, 10-ounce.
Yeah, I grew 8 to 10-ounce steak. That's about my average. Sometimes I'll find a bigger cattle, you know, that if they're older, I'll get big steaks, you know, but they're popular too.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of young people eat bigger steaks and really their eyes go out big. And, I mean, you bring out a 2-inch steak, it sells.
Yeah, yeah.
Or steak is easy to sell. It's the hamburger and roasts and things like that are harder to sell.
What does your hamburger go for?
My hamburger, I have different levels, but right now our ground round is $6.99 a pound.
$6.99.
Where our number one grind is a blend of short ribs, brisket, and chuck, and we get $9.40 a pound for that.
Okay.
That's a little higher fat.
More flavor.
Well, more flavor, but it's better for grilling.
Okay.
You know, people are used to are eating a fat hamburger. That's just what you make
in America.
That's how they know how to cook it.
Uh-huh.
You get a lean hamburger like round, you have to cook it differently. Now you cook all my steaks differently. It takes shorter, quick cooking time to get the deal.
High heat?
High heat,
Short,
quick.
Sear both sides.
I like that caramelized taste of that seared.
Mm-hmm.
You want that, change color and get that caramelize that sugars or whatever is in it caramelized, but that's a lot of taste.
Oh yeah.
And I don't want it cold in the middle. I want it warm.
Right.
But I don't mind if it's red.
Yeah.
And people, say, well, I don't want the blood. I don't need the. Well, the cows are drained of blood before they're cut up. I mean, that's a big deal. Is you kill them and let them drain, and so it's not really blood, but that's just that visual concept of that.
What do you like to cook your meat in?
Well, I like olive oil mostly.
Oh.
Butter is really
Butter.
good. Everything's better with butter.
Oh yeah.
Bacon grease.
That's what I've been using lately.
Bacon grease is good. So bacon has nitrates. If you can get and even all natural bacon has nitrates. It's a source of nitrates, that makes a difference, I guess. But you can make bacon without nitrates. You make bacon just is brined pork belly. You can make it in 5 or 6 days in a brine solution with whatever spices you like. As long as you keep it cold or freeze it, it's not going to go bad. But nitrates extends the life of bacon.
Preservative.
Preservative, yeah.
And that's not great.
Well, yeah, and of course you say, well, on all natural bacon, the source of nitrates is beet powder or celery powder. Or in normal bacon, it's minerals that are mined, or that's how you get that. But nitrates is nitrates. It don't matter what source. I don't say all natural bacon is any more healthy for you than regular bacon. They still have nitrates. That's what bacon is. But you can take belly and put it in a brine and leave it for about 5 days, and then dry it out and slice it up, and boy, it's good.
I make a lot of bacon.
You make bacon?
Yeah. So I was like, I might as well be saving all this bacon fat, this bacon
it's
grease.
good. Bacon's great.
Yeah.
But that's all they always talk about, red meats and bacon and processed, like pastrami or corned beef or
salami
have the nitrates that do it. Which,
I need to look into that. I haven't heard of that.
It's not, as long as you don't do it in excess.
Yeah.
Everything was in moderation, I feel. I mean,
For
some
sure.
people, I guess, are genetically predisposed that it affects them worse. Maybe, I don't know.
I think that's true.
But in moderation, it shouldn't be bad that you eat bacon once a month or once in a while. Or I eat bacon all the time. They're on my diet.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Same here. Maybe 2-3 times a week.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
But generally, I'll buy sausage instead, pork sausage.
Are there any trends in the grass-fed or industrial beef industry that you see shaping the future of ranching and farming?
Well, grass-fed is definitely it's probably the fastest growing segment of the food industry.
Really?
Meat too, but it's not a big chunk of it. We're talking about maybe 8% of meat sold is grass-fed, as opposed, but it's growing. I don't know what it is now. That's things I've read in the past, but it's growing. I mean, you do have big grass-fed outfits that produce lots of grass-fed beef that you don't see in this area. When you come to this area here, the demographics is mostly lower economic status. You go to California or the East Coast, you'll see a great deal of difference in what you sell.
As a grass-fed beef producer, what's one thing that you wish other people would better understand about your product?
Well, one thing about grass-fed is all cattle, except dairy cows, but the 99% of cattle are all grass-fed. Everything's raised on the range in open range situations, as opposed to pork and chicken. The definition of a free-range chicken, you know what it is?
I don't know free-range. I know pasture-raised. Because those are different.
Free-range just means that a chicken can stand in a pen with all the other chickens and spread her wings out and not touch another chicken.
Wow.
That's a definition, you know.
And it sounds like they're out in the wild.
A hog can be raised, a pig, pork can be raised, born, raised, and slaughtered, and never touch ground or never see the light of day.
Wow.
I mean, they raise them on platform for waste management, and that's the type of deal that where grass-fed beef. I mean, beef always is raised in a natural situation. They're never put in little pens and expect to live their whole life there raising calves and never get out. It just doesn't happen. Not in our industry. No, it doesn't. It's after they wean them to processing that they get in the industrialized
feedlots.
Yeah, feedlots, and I don't want to talk bad about feeders. I mean, they're there, and I'm not going to try to feed the masses,
right.
the billions of people.
Right. It's
but
necessary.
Somebody has to.
Yeah.
And they're a necessity that vegetables cannot replace.
For sure.
I mean,
it's just the brutal reality.
Yeah, well, it's just, that's the way, and they help. I mean, they help with kids. When you're raising kids, they have to have protein.
Yeah.
I can't imagine raising a kid without protein and beef form,
No. And I think whether it's industrial or grass-fed, even the conventional beef is a much better alternative to this ultra-processed food, which is
sure
the other option.
Well, you're talking about producing a meat-like product in a laboratory.
Come on, man.
I mean, that's just
sick.
Growing it. I mean, they're actually growing that stuff, which will be great when we reach outer space, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But right here now, I don't look at it like that.
No. You have a milk cow?
Oh, we used to.
Raw milk?
Yeah, we ate lots of raw milk.
That
was one of my things I got as pay when I first started working for a ranch. They gave me basically all the beef I could eat. I got a milk cow, and they gave me some groceries too, as part of my pay. But yeah, we've milked cows for years.
Nice.
And I hate milk cow. They're more demanding than your wife. You have to milk them twice a day. Or take care of that milk twice a day because they're going to produce it whether you want. And you can get fat as a pig drinking milk. I mean, because you have so much of it. I mean, a cow produces, even a marginal cow is going to produce 2 gallons twice a day. And that's 4 gallons a day for a family of 4.
Yeah.
And, my wife makes cottage cheese, and she makes cheese, and she makes, everything. And we fed the dogs, we fed the cats, and fed the hogs. Everything gets milk. So, but it's good, and it's hard to find.
Yeah.
It's really hard to find. Because USDA has a lock on it, and these dairy farmers don't want people to come in and raise and be able to sell that stuff.
Disrupt their market.
Because it's tough on them. I mean, our dairy industry here in the Mesilla Valley used to support, 8 or 10 dairies. There's only 3 of them left now because of the demand. I mean, everybody produces milk out of everything now: almond milk, oat milk, soy milk. I mean,
yeah,
you can buy all sorts of kinds of milk.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if it's good or bad, but the source of calcium for growing children, dairy is the best.
Man.
You can't get any better than that.
And I was never a huge fan of milk. And I loved cheese and ice cream, though.
Yeah.
And just recently I found out, I've had bad acne my whole life. Found out dairy was the source of my acne. Well, guess what? I started trying raw dairy. No issues. So since then, I've been drinking raw milk, raw cheese, and I love it.
And the biggest difference between raw milk and pasteurized milk is just pasteurization.
Yeah.
I mean, they have homogenization too that shakes it so much that it doesn't separate. But But pasteurization is the main deal, and the reason they pasteurize it is because of undulant fever or brucellosis, because that is a debilitating disease that you never get over. It shortens your life and everything. And they had to pasteurize milk because people would die.
When did that start?
I don't know when they first discovered it, but pasteurization of milk really was in the 40s and 50s. It really took off, I guess, with the big dairies. But it's been around forever. I mean, that disease, it manifests itself in cattle. It's called brucellosis. And I used to vaccinate for brucellosis on cattle. That was a big deal. You didn't want brucellosis. And you're supposed to be brucellosis free if you import cattle from state to state. A lot of states have restrictions. They have to pass a brucellosis test.
Gotcha.
To get in there.
Okay.
But that's why you have pasteurization.
Gotcha.
And I don't know how. And all that does is heat it up to kill the pathogens.
Right.
And that's it.
Well, here's my theory on why I can handle it. Is I think it also, during that pasteurization process, it kills the enzymes that are naturally in there.
Sure.
And I think my body needs those enzymes to process it.
Yes, it will.
And that's why it affects me. And I know there's so many people out there that can't handle dairy. They have gut issues or whatever.
The older you get, the you get lactose intolerant.
Mm-hmm.
The older you get. Yeah.
But I'm curious to see if those people can handle the raw dairy because it has those enzymes.
That's a good point.
It's an idea.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've been loving it, and it's changed the game for me for my acne and my stomach.
Yeah.
So I love it. But
well, good.
I guess I need to be careful with that disease. Do I need to be checking my source, make sure that cow's vaccinated?
I don't know. I think that's important, to get vaccinated. And cleanliness of the dairy and, all that stuff has a lot to do with it.
It's a friend.
Birds have a lot to do with it. Birds transmit disease in dairies all the time.
Wow.
They closed all the dairies in El Paso County because of tuberculosis that was brought in by pigeons from Juarez.
Wow.
I mean, that's...
How do you stop the birds? You can't stop the birds.
Yeah. But, that's just... knowing
Nature.
your source of what you buy to eat, that's really important.
For sure.
You know your farmer, know your rancher, or know who produces it. Go and talk to them,
Yeah. And it's a friend. She has a milk cow. She got it for her own kid. And she, like you said, has way more milk than she knows what to do with.
Yeah.
So she had to start selling it. And so far I've had no issues. So I'm going to keep drinking it.
Well, I drank it for years. I never had any issue with it.
Yeah.
Just got belly on me. That's the worst part.
So where can people find you if they're looking for some grass-fed beef? I'm
at the Farmers Market in Las Cruces on downtown Maine, on the corner of Main and Las Cruces Street, every Saturday from 8:30 to 12. No, to 1. Or you can come to my house outside of Anthony in the Valley during the week by appointment.
And how do they get a hold of you?
My phone number is 575-640-5904. I have a website, but it's down right now. But as soon as I get back up, you can go to my website, which is ganadostilray.com.
ganadostilray.com. What are some good deals that people can take advantage of? Maybe like a subscription service or buying in bulk?
I have a subscription service, $50 a year, that gives you 10% off my retail price. Bulk, I have deals like you can buy a 5-pound pack of hamburger, say 50 cents a pound on the hamburger. 5 1-pound packages. We have steak packs. We have a variety pack, a bonus box. We also sell quarter steer bundles and half steer bundles, where you can get quarter steer bundle is 70 pounds of meat, half steer is 140 pounds of meat, and you get a discount there. Or you can buy a whole steer, and we'll have a custom process for you, and you'll save money there too. Are you working on any new projects lately? Anything you're excited about? Well, just keeping it going is one thing. We do sell lamb also. Okay. We'll have some lamb we can sell retail. In October, I'm taking, I have 10 lamb I'm taking up there to get cut up. Nice. And cut up retail where I can sell that. Or you can buy whole lamb from me and have a custom process.
Wow.
Lamb are very big, so it doesn't. But you have to like lamb.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't like lamb or have never eaten lamb, don't know how to cook it, things like that.
It's got a bit of a gamey flavor to it.
And I raise nothing but hair lambs
Okay.
instead of wool lambs.
Okay.
Wool lambs, that's where you get that lanolin, I think, gives them a taste. But my meat lambs or hair lambs are real mild and real good.
Okay.
I never had that problem.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Right on. If you could recommend 3 of your favorite books of all time, what would you say?
3 of my favorite books. The Wonderful Country by Tom Lee. The Hands of Cantu by Tom Lee. And Criollo Cattle in the Americas by John Roush.
And if you could go back and give 18-year-old John some advice, what would you tell him?
Well, that's a hard one there.
18-year-old John.
18-year-old
with
John.
everything you know today.
Don't date that girl that broke your heart, maybe. I've enjoyed my life and what I've done. Had some problems. I probably got into trouble. Would not be getting into trouble as much as I did. I got into some trouble, but I've enjoyed being a rancher and being out in nature all my professional career.
That's
I
awesome.
got to do that. That's been a joy for me.
It's a beautiful way to live, and I think it's awesome what you do for the community and everyone around here. So thank you so much for what you do.
I appreciate the opportunity to come talk to you.
Thank you for coming on.